very excited to be your moderator. Whether you're getting insights on applying to Georgetown or exploring options for your next academic steps, we are thrilled to have you with us. Um, Today's webinar will cover valuable insights into Georgetown's graduate admissions process. We'll be talking with an amazing speakers today about things like scholarships, strategies of application, what kind of candidate is the best candidate for Georgetown Graduate School, and some practical advice on navigating the application journey, perhaps. Yes, we have two incredible speakers who will guide us through these topics and share their expertise. So let me introduce our distinguished guest from Georgetown University. Apurva is an Admissions and Alumni Fellow, Georgetown University. She's closely engaged with applications and university life, and she'll share all her insights with the university, including application process. We're also to have Doug, Director of Admissions and Alumni Engagement and Georgetown University Center for Security Studies. That is a wealth of knowledge in graduate admissions, and he'll provide an inside look into the admission process and scholarship opportunities. So thank you both for being here to share your expertise with us. Begin with, we go through our agenda today. Our two speakers will share presentations covering the respective areas of expertise about the program and everything. And after our presentation, we'll open the floor to a Q&A session. So please feel free to type any questions you may have into the chat throughout the presentation. We'll be keeping an eye on your questions, and we'll address as many as we can during Q&A. So let us start then. I'll try to make this bigger.
I was going to say, Laura, I'm happy to drive the slide deck. I have it set up on a separate tab, so I'm happy to share screen and take it.
Yeah,
that's okay.
Yeah, that'll be fine. I think you can do that.
Let me see how it works.
Oh, amazing.
Ooh, apologies, wrong one there. Apurva, just a quick audio confirmation that you'll see the slide deck. Is that correct?
Yep, I can see it.
Thank you so much. Well, thank you, everyone, and good evening, and thanks for carving out a little bit of time to join us today. As Laura had mentioned, we represent Georgetown University in the School of Foreign Service. There are a lot of different programs and sort of directions here. So just to clarify one step further, within the School of Foreign Service, 10 individual graduate programs. Apurva and I represent the Security Studies program, which is the nation's, for the United States, the nation's sort of preeminent master's degree, which is devoted to the studies of security. It's also the #1 program in the world, according to Foreign Policy, for this sort of graduate level program. So as you can tell by the bottom left there, we're going to be covering a lot of grounds, but just for the sake of time, because I know it's in the evening over in Dubai, we'll move relatively quickly just so we can spend the lion's share certainly in and around the admissions process and answer your questions regarding scholarship opportunities, but perhaps most importantly, hearing from Apurva, who is a current student within our program. She works within the Admissions and Alumni Office as our fellow. I'm going to kick it over to her, Apurva, if you don't mind, just kind of quickly introducing yourself, your story, and perhaps what sparked your interest in applying for the Security Studies program at Georgetown, and then we'll take it from there.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you so much, Doug. So hello, everybody. As Doug and Laura both very kindly introduced me, my name is Apurva. I'm in my 3rd semester in the Security Studies program with a concentration on terrorism and sub-state violence. I'm an international student. I'm originally from India, but I grew up all over the Middle East, moved around the GCC quite a bit, actually. So presumably I've been in similar situations to some of you on this call. I'm happy to answer any questions that you might have in that regard. As for what really got me interested, and I think maybe that would be a really good setup to the transition into academics for Doug, but it was definitely the breadth and depth of the coursework that was offered in addition to some of the most fantastic faculty that we have. I always thought that I had kind of a niche interest in even within the field of security, and I found a home for that within the security studies program at Georgetown. I think there is a fantastic community of scholars, of practitioners, and of peers who are there to support you, but also who kind of there to help your professional and personal growth. So I think that a combination of just the courses that are offered, the faculty that are just some of the most eminent leading experts in their fields, and perhaps just that very real sense of community that I found within the program is something that undoubtedly made me want to choose SSP and Georgetown. So I'll kick it over to Doug.
Yeah, something to note here, Purva, before we kind of even do a deeper dive is, and I know you hear me talk about this on a somewhat regular basis, but sort of gone are the days where you need to necessarily have an undergraduate degree in international affairs or global relations or history or political science in order to explore this as an additional facet or something to take into consideration for a future career. I say this because I know you've had a few different academic foundations in your undergrad, and you applied to the program directly from, your undergraduate journey. Could you kind of expand upon that a little bit more? Was it sort of the program, or was it sort of an end goal that sort of led to that next step in your academic journey?
Yeah, different academic background to say the least, I think. Thank you for that question. So for a little bit of context, Doug is absolutely right. I actually applied straight out of undergrad. In fact, I quite literally graduated in July and I was in the States in August. So it was a crazy turnaround. But I did a triple major degree when I was in undergrad, in political science, history, and English, but my specialization was in archaeology. That's what my dissertation was on as well. But while I was in my undergraduate institution, I was also part of an organization with the Indian Ministry of Defense, where basically I received basic military training for 3 years. So I think kind of my conversations with the military personnel there, particularly engaged in, cross-border counterterrorism operations, is what got me really thinking about the fact that I find this field of study very fascinating. But, I didn't want to be the one pulling the guns or pulling the triggers on the guns. So I was really thinking about along those lines as I was actively working on an archaeology-based dissertation. But I think that something that's so unique to this program is the cohort itself, which comes in with such diverse experiences. And I'm not the only one who's coming in with a completely non-traditional, non-security studies background. There's so many of us in here that do that. But if it's any reassurance, I would say that no skill absolutely is wasted. I have found that, certain skills that I have developed even in and throughout my studies, whether that's something as simple as writing assignments or, something as simple as giving presentations, but also something more technical that are, specific to, at least I can talk for archaeology, whether that's geospatial software skills or whether that is, citations, small things that you don't think will add up, but that definitely do and that make an impact, both in your application process, but also while you're actively in the program. I found that it is this diversity of perspectives that really add value to what I'm learning in the program, because another thing that the program really emphasizes on is the idea of peer learning. And I won't spoil, I know Doug's getting to it in a little bit, but classes are kept, intentionally small. And I have found in my experience that I have learned just as much, if not more, from my peers who are coming in from these different backgrounds as I have from my professors.
Thanks, Apurva. Yeah, I mean, why do we even need a presentation at this point? We can just have a powwow back and forth and shoot the breeze, which is really nice. Hopefully that laid a pretty good foundation for what is to come throughout the course of this, relatively, hopefully quick presentation. But just to start us off with a little more context to the School of Foreign Service. And again, this is just kind of counseling and graduate admissions 101. no matter where you are in the journey, whether you are actively in the throes of an application at the graduate level, whether you're just considering it and you're in the very early stages, or whether you're kind of buttoning everything up and you're in the 11th hour of it, you're going to find a lot, especially within the United States and, in and throughout Europe, you're going to find a lot of semantics. There are schools of international affairs, international relations, global affairs. Georgetown is the oldest running school for international affairs in the United States. It's one of the oldest in the world, but we were founded in 1919, so we're well over 100 years at this point. And we were founded as the School of Foreign Service. Obviously, at that time in the United States, at the cusp of the Great World War, not too dissimilar from what we're kind of experiencing now in the global landscape. There is dissonance, there is tension, there is, countries who are isolationists and those that are populists, and we're in a really unique timeline and an opportunity to ensure that we are here to cultivate the next generation of leaders, of scholars, of analysts, and really warping the enterprise of the national and international security workforce, whether that is here domestically with the United States or in Apoorva's case, and as many of our international students can entail, across the entire globe. We naturally have a campus in Qatar, not too far from Dubai at all, but we're also opening up a campus to an extent, a series of policy labs in Jakarta in Indonesia. So again, really expanding and taking what is an otherwise traditional graduate education or graduate approach in the United States. And instead of being an Americanized program looking out, we're very much a global program looking in. So, some of the fast facts and nuggets and takeaways, the term foreign service was originated at Georgetown University. The only other place that you're going to find that term is the U.S. Department of State. So the State Department, they're interchangeable. They took it from us in the early 1900s or whatever it was. But it's a point of pride. It's a timestamp. It's something to ensure, our legacy and the prestige and the caliber of our programs. And it's all kind of interconnected throughout those additional points. Naturally, the insurmountable access here within Washington, D.C. to prominent speakers and alums and our faculty firsthand, the resources are aplenty. I mean, I don't think I need to speak too much more about DC and its access and how poignant and important it is to be in a nation's capital at such a time where change is happening in real time. So again, we do have this focus between theory and practice. We have stellar practitioners and experts in the field who are here on the front lines, constantly evolving our curriculum. And that, to Apoorva's point, being peer-driven is really important to us, because we, at any point in time, in Apoorva's case, she can say, hey, listen, we're looking for a little bit more coursework or programming or co-curricular activities in counterterrorism in and throughout the Middle East, or Arctic security, or Baltic security, water security, and the like. AI, there's always something that is going to be sort of bucking the trend and establishing the new and the next in security, whatever that is in any capacity. And the fact that we have that opportunity to be just so agile and nimble and creative on the back end is really endearing and behooves us. Apoorva, not to put you on the spot in any capacity, I know this is really impromptu. We always have incredible speakers that come to this campus, whether it is from your first year or this past year. Any in particular that you just want to bring to the surface, just for the sake of everybody's awareness, that you got to sit in on firsthand?
Oh gosh, and I have to pick just one.
Maybe a handful, whatever you want to choose, whatever you want to disclose, that's up to you.
Oh, thank you. I think just within the larger School of Foreign Service, also there's so many of these opportunities to attend, talks with high-profile speakers. But I would also say, given, the security focus of our program, the CSS Speaker Series has brought on some excellent guests. I think we had General, it was, I believe, Mark Milley, who had come and gave us kind of gave a talk about like sort of military relations in the US and how that translated across, particularly in US operations across the Middle East. And I believe he touched upon Iraq and Iran. And I thought that was just absolutely a fascinating talk, particularly as an international student. I recently also attended an SFS talk, which was on the war in Gaza a year later, but from an economic perspective. So there were perspectives coming in from Iran, there were perspectives coming in from Syria, Jordan, and we also had and also Yemen. And one of the speakers was actually the first woman ambassador to the United Nations from Yemen. So I have to mention, just because it was amazing. But we had the leader of the opposition, Indian opposition, Rahul Gandhi, also come on campus and sort of give a talk. So, it's just, and funnily enough, there's been these events across DC as well. To the best of my knowledge, I also know that think tanks across DC has also invited the current finance minister of India. So, and it's funny because I'm away from India, but I feel closer to my Indian politicians here because Georgetown particularly provides these opportunities. Even the CSIS event, for what it's worth, was something that I got to know about through Georgetown. So the list will go on. I will speak endlessly about these speakers, ironically, but just to give you that sort of idea that, there's experiences that you never think you might have, but you end up having just by virtue of being in a school as fantastic as Georgetown.
Couldn't agree more. But yeah, the options are certainly endless in that scale, and it's actually quite overwhelming, to be honest with you, because I feel like every single week we get our newsletters and we get our briefs and we get our events updates across the university, and there just isn't enough time in the day. But kudos to Georgetown at large, and certainly the School of Foreign Service for really being intentional and representing every voice and every party and every demographic and belief. And it carries over to the fact that we are, a Jesuit university. For those out of the loop, myself included, before I started working for them for well over a decade, the Jesuits are sort of the world travelers of the Catholic Church. They're the researchers, they're the philosophers, but they're the ones that are really badgering our students and making sure that there's critical thinking and problem solving and sort of expanding upon the why. While you're not necessarily going to have a class that's taught in that theological component, you're never going to have a Jesuit priest in front of your classroom, there's still that pedagogy that carries over into us within the security studies program and across the School of Foreign Service at large. There's always going to be that deep analytical and theoretical thinking, which is critical to this type of a program, but also this type of an industry. So again, just to ensure that you as a graduate are leaving not just polished and fine-tuned, but as a refined expert, whether you just decide to go back to your home country, whether you decide to stay in the United States, if you're able to do so, it really is fantastic to see that we're able to meet our students exactly where they are and to shepherd them in and throughout this entire journey. I mentioned it very briefly. We're here for the Security Studies program. We are, by and large, the largest graduate program within the School of Foreign Service. The flagship program, interestingly, is the more general degree, which is the Master of Science in Foreign Service, MSFS. I worked as their Deputy Director of Admission. I teach currently within the MSFS department, so I'm happy to field any questions. If anybody is aware of MSFS in any capacity, I'm happy to answer any questions in that regard. But as you can see, we kind of branch out, whether that is thematic or whether that's regionally focused. There are a lot of different individual programs here. I'm able to answer a lot of them across the board, but should any of these other programs seem like a better fit for you, you're welcome to reach out directly to those departments, because they do have different class sequences and requirements and admissions requirements and faculty and the like. So just to know that these are really individualized conversations, but likewise, there are really creative ways of interchangeably working with them. We have, for instance, and it's actually a seamless transition to the next slide, under that bottom bucket with electives, we do have graduate certificates. Graduate certificates in many ways are akin to, undergraduate minors, perhaps. They might be 4 to 6 classes. They might be contingent upon language proficiency within that particular region. But say you are focused primarily in national or international security, but you do have a regional focus in and throughout the Middle East or Arab studies in particular, or say you're looking to really focus on East Asia or Southeast Asia, you're able to sort of bridge and to bolster that graduate certification. So within your open electives, within your chosen concentration, you see the 6 that are listed there, and just additional distributives. I always say that the hardest part of this entire program is choosing what 10 classes you ultimately want to take. We offer hundreds, if not to the tune of thousands, on a regular basis. So, to really conceptualize your 2-year journey as a full-time in-person international student here on Georgetown's campus, that is always going to be the trickiest part. I do want to kick it over to Apurva, if you don't mind, just kind of nerding out for a second, the types of classes that you had taken, the classes perhaps in your final semester in the program that you're looking forward to taking, but also just where from here and how they ultimately teed you up and prepared you for this next leg in your professional journey.
Thank you, Doug. Always looking for an opportunity to nerd out about classes that I'm taking, oftentimes unsolicited with all my friends. But now I have the great opportunity to do that. I think, in case I didn't give it away with how much I talked about it in my introduction, because of my concentration in terrorism and sub-state violence, my specific areas of interest lie within the Middle East. I more so focus on the jihadi Salafi ideologies there. So to that effect, I have taken classes on, terrorism and counterterrorism, the core, but it was a class that was taught by one of our fantastic faculty members, who was actually on the National Security Council and advised President Trump against ISIS operations. And then I took classes on, of course, jihadi Salafi violent extremism from a more ideological perspective, where we really engaged with original literature from like the extremist perspective to understand where patterns of radicalization are coming from. I kind of also really wanted to diversify, I didn't want to have myself stuck in that terrorism in the Middle East loop. And I think that's where the distributive requirements, especially with like economics and security or tech and security, come into play, because when you have that opportunity, when it's structurally mandated for you to step out of your comfort zone, then you realize that you have more interests than you would have thought. I ended up taking a class on, this semester in biotechnology and security, where we deal with a range of policy issues with regard to biotechnology as well. I was enrolled in a class on trafficking, especially of humans, drugs, and arms. I'm also currently enrolled in a class on GIS, which for security studies, which essentially deals with geospatial data intelligence and basically building maps and kind of doing statistical analysis of those maps. So we primarily work with softwares like QGIS and R. And there's a range of things we can do with, a class like that, where, if you're very interested in traditional security measures, maps are everywhere and maps are essential for everything. So, whether that is me looking at like a conflict map, or whether that's people studying climate maps or, maps of luminosity data to do economic analysis, that's something that you can do with that. So there's so much I'm learning with just that one class, actually. And looking ahead, I have a semester left, which is very sad, because I would like to definitely stay in the program. It's just we have so many good classes and just the space to take 12. But I am enrolled in a class on hate groups and social media. It's a class with the director of our program, Dr. Dan Byman, who's also a leading expert in terrorism, particularly in the Middle East, and is also looking into dynamics of online extremism. So that is something I'm very excited for. And I'm also taking a research seminar and a class on artificial intelligence and national security. So with Dr. Imbri, who is also a leading expert in this field, just the best man, which I'm very, very excited for. And so, as you can tell clearly, there is no singular path that your degree has to follow in order for you to get that holistic experience out of it, or in order for you to make the maximum use of it. There have been classes I've been enrolled in which are not specific to writing, for example, but writing is such a critical component of the program. So there are these classes particularly I would say like a class I took on ethnic conflicts. Shout out to Dr. Tammy Schultz, who really wanted us to learn beyond just the subject matter, essential transferable skills for real life. So a lot of our classes, and that's not specific to that class, but a lot of our classes emphasize on writing, particularly in the policy context, whether that's writing memos or whether that's writing reports or briefs, and also presentation skills, whether that's you doing a briefing, whether that's you in a class which has simulations of the Security Council, just all these ranges of very essential transferable skills for the real world, for your professional world once you graduate. And so that's really been my experience with classes. I have to say that whatever I end up doing in the future after my graduation, my experiences at SSP, whether that's by virtue of the classroom discussions where I was, which forced me to take on perspectives that I had never before considered, or whether it is by virtue of these skills that I've developed in and throughout the program, I know that SSP will have a huge role to play in whatever my transition post-graduation looks like. And so kind of just on that note, to answer your last question, Doug, I hope once I graduate to be somewhere in the realms of counterterrorism analysis, whether that's by virtue of working with an international organization or an NGO or even a think tank. That is primarily where my goal is, but eventually I would like to go back to my country and work for my government. So we'll see how that goes.
Thanks for sharing, Apurva. Always insightful and inspiring, truly, because there are so many routes and strategies as to going about this type of curriculum, and every decision in class that you take can just warp the trajectory of your future or what sort of industry you're looking to pursue. So again, I think it's one of the benefits of our program, even though we have about 450 students total, a number of whom are part-time students, which means within the United States, they're working full-time. They might be in the Pentagon, in the DoD, in DOJ, something in that effect, and having a full 9 to 5, but our classes are taught exclusively in the evening. But we have an innate ability to be able to cap all of our classes at 18 students. So Apurva's classes are incredibly individualized and focused, and again, peer driven and really seminar style. So I think it's a key advantage when looking at this type of a program. These are just a couple of examples when it comes to courses that are available. Again, we offer hundreds on a regular basis. So this is kind of looking at the program as a generalist, thinking very far and wide, dipping your toes into a lot of different types of waters and getting a really broad and diverse portfolio. Whereas if you're looking to do a deep dive and to leave preparing to be an academic or to go on for a PhD, or even in law, for instance, you're able to do so just the same and to really hone in on a very niche and specific field and focus. So a lot of different ways to approach this type of curriculum, but just to know that we have academic advisors, we have career coaches, you have faculty mentors, you have alumni mentors to really help you every single step of the way here. This is as we kind of transition over into admissions land, this is a class profile of the most recent incoming class for our fall students. We offer 2 intakes for admissions. We offer one in the spring, which actually our students are about to commit. So they'll be starting at the top of 2025, but the majority of our students tend to enroll in the fall semester, which is usually August, September. The deadline, we'll talk about that a little bit later, but for now, this is what their class profile kind of averages out to be. Take it with a grain of salt. Again, with international students in particular, some of these data can get a little weeded, especially on the GPA side. Again, we convert to a 4.0 unweighted scale, and we can talk about that in a little bit, but our average is about a 3.67. Again, these are high achieving students with some form of work experience. 4 years is the average, but again, we have nearly 500 students. So we have a large number of students that matriculate directly from undergrad, like Apurva. We have a number of students that are seasoned professionals out in the working field, and we get to sort of leverage all of each other's experiences. Naturally, the undergraduate students, or those that are recent undergrads, walk into this program with a really finessed and strong sort of analytical understanding and strong writing components, whereas those who have been working professionally for a while, they're bringing skills-based solutions into the class. So it's pretty interchangeable in that regard. We have the gender split. Again, we have 1 in about 5 students are international in some capacity, and 1 in 4 are military affiliated. And for those that are submitting the GRE and the TOEFL and were admitted and enrolled in the university, these were the average test scores in that regard as well. More to come on that. This is a quick profile from our Graduate Career Center. They focus just with graduate students within the School of Foreign Service. Our direct liaison and career coach worked in the industry herself. She knows us. She knows our students. She knows the type of work that they're ultimately pursuing, whether that's here domestically in the United States or whether that's abroad. So just to know that you have that career coach, you'll have an alumni mentor just the same. But I think this gives a really impressive outlook. 98.4% within 6 months of graduation. Some would argue that 1.6% remainder are folks that are just waiting for security clearances. But I think the key takeaway here, friends, is that there may have been a time historically where a lot of our students would go directly into the public sector, thinking of the Department of State or, energy or commerce or justice, within the United States, but it's just not the case anymore. As you can tell, there's a pretty even split between the private sector, the public sector, but sort of in line with Apoorva, what she ultimately wants to do, think tanks, nonprofits, NGOs, and the like. So we prepare our students as graduates to be able to, really diversify and to be agile and to be able to be very versatile professionals out in the field. You shouldn't feel pigeonholed in any capacity as you graduate from these programs and go out and explore that, the workforce or the next stage in your career in that regard. I'd mentioned it a couple times before, but we have an incredible alumni mentor program that Apoorva and my dear colleagues spearhead really individually. It's a very simple program in the sense that our current students are able to raise their hand and say, hey, I'm looking to connect with an alum, somebody who graduated from the program who's working in XYZ type of field with this type of profile, and we're able to matchmake them in real time. So just to know that, again, it's that additional extension, whether it is for coffee if they happen to be local, whether that's via Zoom if they're on the other side of the world, but just to know you have that additional layer of support and resources as you go through this program. A really typical candidate profile, again, it's kind of atypical nowadays. It means a work experience, what sort of international experiences they have, and their academic backgrounds. We're getting a lot of students nowadays with backgrounds in business, in physical science, in the medical field, or engineering, for instance. Archaeology, perhaps, I'll just throw it out there. So again, it doesn't necessarily matter what you've done, or who you are. It's why us, why you want to study for SSP in security studies or the School of Foreign Service at large, and how we as a program are going to get you ultimately to where you want to go and what you want to do. Leads us to our final point here, friends, which is the admissions process. So I'll start before going through sort of this checklist. When you apply to the program, you are automatically considered for all of our internal merit-based academic scholarships. They really run the gamut, to be honest with you. So they range from a good chunk of partial tuition up to about 40 to 50% of our tuition total. There are some internal scholarship opportunities within Georgetown, within the School of Foreign Service, that do offer full rides. So it is just important to note that sometimes it's just based and contingent upon the competitiveness of your application. But just to know that those opportunities are out there, and you're never going to know until you formally apply, get admitted into the program, and move forward through the process in that regard. But our team does I think, an exceptional job, and just making sure that we're keeping that conversation at the surface, because if you are admitted into this program because we are competitive, we want you to enroll. This is not a situation where we're throwing you into the deep end without a life vest. We want to make sure that we are giving you the resources necessary to succeed. So just to know that that is first and foremost in regards to scholarship eligibility. It is automatically considered. You don't have to submit a separate application or any of that. There are, of course, external scholarship opportunities, and we encourage you to peruse our website, reach out to us as an office just to see what is out there. It means of global fellowships and beyond, because there are a good number of opportunities, especially in and throughout the Middle East and Saudi Arabia and Qatar, for students that are pursuing a graduate level education, abroad. But it means of the application process itself, for those that may be considering applying in this next step, January 15 is that line in the sand. That is the final admissions deadline in order to be considered for fall 2025 enrollment. Again, fall means August, September here in the United States, but January 15 is the day to ensure that all of your materials are processed and finalized and submitted to be considered for admission. If you apply by December the 1st, that $90 USD fee for the application is waived. So again, if you complete your application by December 1, it is a free application. I know that it gives only a couple of weeks, but nevertheless, there are a couple, there's sort of a laundry list of internal affiliation groups and other ways to get that campus fee waiver for the application itself. In addition to your academic transcript and a resume, there is no page limit to your CV or resume that you decide to submit. We request and ask for at least 3 letters of recommendation. And obviously, as international students, if you are seeking F1 or J1 status, the TOEFL or the IELTS is also required for admission. The 2 big components to consider here in means of the application process is the statement of purpose and potentially the GRE or the analytical writing sample. We'll start with the statement of purpose. It is, without a doubt, one of the most important parts of this entire process. In 500 words to conceptualize who you are, what you've done, what you want to do, and how we're going to get you there is not easy. So that is something that we as an admissions committee take very seriously, and we look for an advanced level of writing, of course, for that technicality, for that skill set, just to make sure that we're the right program for you and we're going to help you in that succession. In addition to the statement of purpose, which is required, every program within the School of Foreign Service, it is optional to submit that GRE, which I think is really important for international students in particular. You should not feel obligated to take the GRE if you didn't necessarily do so already. So if you decide to forego the GRE in part of the application process, it's not a problem whatsoever. In fact, the majority of our applicants do so, but instead we ask for that supplement. So if you decide to not submit the GRE, you are required to submit an analytical writing sample. Ours is a 600-word prompt. It is to discuss a security challenge and how you would intend to resolve it. So it's pretty open, it's pretty vague, it's pretty loose, but again, gives you an opportunity to put words on the paper, to establish that academic writing style, to cite, to source, and to view yourself potentially as a student. We have faculty members who serve on our admissions committee. So thinking about handing over that analytical writing sample and how is that going to read to faculty in real time? So all of that is important in the grand scheme of this admissions process. There are a couple optional additional pieces, whether that's a background statement or whether that is academic writing samples from your undergraduate career, if you have that research portfolio, but that kind of sums up the admissions process in a nutshell there. And last but certainly not least, and you can peruse our website for more on this side, Apoorva, her colleague JB, who is another student and one of our other fellows, my colleague Khadija, our assistant director, and myself, we offer a series of 20-minute virtual office hour appointments. These are just very informal, casual check-ins. Whether you want to hear more about Apoorva and her story, whether you want to connect with JB and hear his story, whether you have very specific questions about financial aid, scholarship, and the admissions process, you can connect with myself or Khadija. But feel free to take note of that website. Again, no need to scratch it too quickly. You can also send us an email at sspadmissions@georgetown.edu. There are a number of different ways to connect with us in real time, just to make sure that we're helping you every single step of the way. So with that, I'll stop sharing my screen and I'll open the floor for questions, comments, concerns, however else we can help.
Oh, thank you, Doug and Apurva, for the detailed overview. We have one question, but I was thinking that it was covered. Does SSP fall under the scope of LLM? It doesn't. That was the question.
I'm so sorry, Laura. I missed the question. Could you
The
repeat it?
question is, does SSP fall under the scope of LLM?
So LLM as in
Law, masters in law.
for law, I figured as much.
Yeah.
So no. So Georgetown University has a separate law center. That said, there are some caveats. The first of which is that we do offer a dual degree with the law school. So theoretically, you would be able in 4 years as a full-time student to pursue a dual degree within a Master of Art in Security Studies, as well as a JD from Georgetown Law. The biggest takeaway here on this side is to remember that these are two very different admissions processes, and you do have to apply to both programs simultaneously. So just to know that it's an option. We also have a dual degree with the PhD in government. So no to LLM as a degree within security studies, but if you are looking to study international security law, that is very much a focus that we can accommodate.
Okay. And we have 2 more questions from our WhatsApp chat. The first question was, given that this program is ideally suited for government service positions, such as those at Pentagon, are international students eligible for employment opportunities within the US government, particularly if they wish to stay and work in USA after graduation?
So Apurva, so the shorthand answer to the question is unfortunately no, in the sense that if you are not a US citizen, you cannot work for the US government in that regard, but there are really creative ways to pivot to work in the greater sort of federal contracting space, again, for think tanks that are relatively adjacent, that have dotted lines to the US government, or certainly rubber banding back home and working in illustrious careers within your home government, which we will prepare to do so and to prepare to help you just the same. But I think Apurva is very well suited for this particular question because you get to really spotlight other international students, i.e. your friends, and what their intentions are after this program. So if you don't mind just sharing a little bit more to help answer the question, I think that'd be wonderful.
Yeah, absolutely. I think you hit the nail on the head with that one. I don't think international students are directly allowed to work for the US government. But Doug, you're absolutely right. There's several federally funded, think tanks across that sort of develop or do research for policy-based research that are eventually then translated into congressional discussions and then, escalated higher on up from there, although I wouldn't know for sure exactly where that hierarchy goes. But you're right. There's also, among the international students, a lot of people looking to pivot more into the private sector, doing work like consultancy definitely is a big field. There's people who are interested in doing risk analysis, political risk assessments for these corporate companies, but also a way to sort of tangentially kind of definitely I will highlight the think tank and NGO space again, because that is a way to tangentially be involved kind of with government policy and government work. I see that Doug has dropped the link for CSET, so I'm going to do a shout out to CSET as well. The CSET is a think tank, the Center for Security and Emerging Technologies, which is sort of it's part of Georgetown, and you will find a lot of SSP alumni and SSP students over there. And just kind of on that note, you'll actually just find a lot of whatever field, whatever career you think you want to do once you graduate, you're going to find inevitably some alumni who's either working there or has a connection over there. That's just because we have such a huge alumni database. So shout out again to the Alumni Mentor Program, because the diverse, the scope of the Alumni Mentor Program is just that. It is there to support people's diverse career aspirations. And having worked on the program and gone through the alumni profiles, including the international alumni, I can truly appreciate how this, different creative ways for the people, actively looking to stay in the US, to sort of find those leverages, whether that is by virtue of working in think tanks, or whether that's by virtue of working in international organizations, and sort of having that diplomatic route into staying here. I think on that also brings to mind another fantastic opportunity for international students that the program organizes, which is an international lunch series, student lunch series, where we have an international alumni. So this is an international student-specific event, and we have alumni who have been international students join us, whether virtually or whether in person, to just kind of chat about our work. We very recently had an alumni come in from the World Bank, who's at the an international alum who works at the World Bank, and just sort of give that kind of insight into students. But you'll also find that there's people who have been deputed, even if not necessarily back to their home countries, but who have been deputed to other countries across the globe, whether that's in Europe or even the Middle East for that matter, working on policy relevant issues to the fields that they have chosen and in and throughout their time here. So I know it was a very long-winded way of saying no, but also it's not a complete full stop. If you want to be involved in that government policy space in some way, there's always that opportunity for you.
Yeah, I think it's also worth acknowledging not necessarily the importance of the concentration, but I think not to go so far as to say that you're an abnormality here, but we have a lot of international students who know that upon completion of this degree, they do contractually have to return to their home country and work for their governments. Our number one international market, for instance, is actually Singapore. And we have a really interesting partnership in that regard. So they, in and throughout their time here in the United States in our program, they focus almost intentionally on either US national security policy or technology, because both ways they know that they have that wherewithal, they have that arsenal of insight that they're able to go back and to be experts in their countries. So there's really no rhyme or reason, again, at the end of the day. And again, I think we definitely do our due diligence in spades to ensure that we are providing all of the resources aplenty for our international students, because it's such a critical and important part of our student population.
Amazing. Thank you for your answers. And one more from me, which is my, legendary question I ask everyone. So with your topic, I mean, everyone is engaged more or less with geopolitics and what is going on in the world right now. And for my students and for everyone who is thinking to apply to your university, what resources or approaches, even books or films, would you recommend of gaining the fundamental understanding of geopolitics, international security, as well as for navigating the application process for the essay writing? And so, I mean, to be on track of what's going on in the world and to at least have the same terminology to talk about.
Yeah, it's such a wonderful question. I'll give a very general and quick response before picking into Apoorva. Something that I always counsel students, because imposter syndrome is real. Doesn't matter who you are, what you've done. As you enter this program, you're going to sit down and there are going to be intelligence officers who've been working in the military for over 10 years, and there are going to be folks who are experts in nuclear non-proliferation. It doesn't necessarily matter who they are, what their areas of focus are. What matters are you and the students themselves, you as the applicant, as to what you are really bringing in to this type of dynamic and this type of working space. So not to say that you should be a jack of all trades and a master of none, but it is important, to your point, Laura, to make sure that you're current, that you're well-read, whatever that is and whatever that looks like. But my big sort of operative word in general counsel is relevancy. Relevancy, I think, is most critical when we are on the back end looking at the sea of applications and making sure that we're curating the most competitive and diverse class profile. Because relevancy, what in the world does that even mean? Like, you can have an internship, but is that for a couple of days? Is that for a couple of months? Is that online? Is that in person? Is that for pay? Is that for credit? You studied abroad. Was that just a week or was that for a year? You have an undergraduate degree in international affairs. How much of a focus on that was security? You did some sort of professional research, or you co-authored a paper. You can go into any sort of graduate admissions process with a fully robust resume and CV and tons of experience, but it doesn't really mean anything unless the relevancy is there and there's that dotted line specifically to the program that you're applying to. So we don't necessarily require or ask for every student to have a long-winded area of expertise in every single focus in international affairs or global relations or national security and the like, but we do need to make sure that every one of our applicants that we are admitting is going to succeed in this type of a program. There are a lot of wonderful programs out there, but we take a lot of pride with who we are and the curriculum that we shape and the type of faculty that we give access to our students. So that's my quick-ish answer, but over to Apurva, because I'd love to hear sort of in your preparation for this program, maybe after you were admitted or in and throughout the application process, because it's a journey, especially that first semester. 5,000 and 5,001 is an immense amount of writing and reading. So would love to hear how you kind of navigated these waters as well, or maybe some counsel that you have for prospective students.
Yeah, thank you, Doug. That was a really wonderful way you put it. And I would echo that to the highest degree. I think that, especially as an international student, when you're coming into the program is kind of a secondary point. At this point, you're actually struggling with your visa. You're struggling with like, okay, I need to come here and what are the legal stuff I need to be doing? So, that transition from like being an admitted student to actually being in the program is going to be different, especially if you've never been outside your country, or there's going to be cultural shocks and like personal, professional, academic, whatever struggles that you're facing. So it's always going to be a challenging time, and I think that's where I really want to echo Doug in what he says, in that the program doesn't, especially my experience with faculty has been that they don't expect you to be experts in their subject on day one of the program. And that is why the 5,000 and 5,001, our core courses, are so integral to the program, and it's mandated for students to take that in the first semester, because there's people coming in with varying degrees of knowledge on these fields, whether it is on the theories of security or whether it is on, strategic studies or military operations and things like that. And Doug is absolutely right. You probably have somebody in the military who has actively lived these things. But there's also people, I don't know, coming in from a different field, like archaeology maybe, who may not be as well versed with these theoretical subjects as much. So I think there is that atmosphere of understanding, of support that exists. We definitely have resources on campus also to support us as we go through the program. Particularly want to point out to the writing fellows that are integral to the program. These are people who in and throughout your time here, you can go and review your sort of writing with them, assignments with them, because again, as an international student, I'm used to a very different style of writing, and how we spell things, and like how that kind of is different to how, like, whether it's spelling or like grammatical rules and these small nitty-gritty like citations, details that actually matter a lot in the grand scheme of things. So the writing fellows are there to help you through it all. We also have our academic advising team. So you will be paired with an academic advisor with whom you can quite literally sit down and talk through literally anything, whether it's you struggling to deal with this coursework, and so seeing how you can structure your program in a way that you're not taking extremely insanely difficult classes all at once, or like how can you stagger those degree requirements that you have. And I will finally say also that my experience with the professors have always been that they're extremely invested in your growth as a student, but also in your growth as an individual. And I've never had a professor turn me down when I've gone asking for support. There have been times where there's concepts I don't understand, or there's contexts I don't understand because I'm an international student. So when there's in just common conversations in class, anecdotes are thrown around that I'm just not aware of. And so I've always made it a point to go to office hours and actually ask, like, okay, what does that mean? And, what are the resources that I can look into? And I think professors quite appreciate that, particularly when you start out on that note, showing that you have that eagerness to learn and reaching out to them preemptively, being like, okay, I'm not familiar with this at all. And I'm a very big beginner. So do you have any readings or movies or whatever it is, like you said, Laura, any resources that you recommend that I have out of the way before I start? And oftentimes professors are more than happy to chat with you during office hours and provide that support to you. So if that's any reassurance, I will say that Doug is absolutely right. It's the aptitude to not only actively participate in a graduate program, but also succeed in the program that matters a lot. But we're not expecting, neither are the professors, and I don't think the admissions team either is expecting you to be a scholar of security studies with nothing left to learn, because then there would be no point of coming here,
Amazing. Well, thank you so much, everyone, for such an engaging session. And thank you, Apurva and Doug, especially for sharing your expertise and insights today. I hope each of you found value in this session and feel better equipped to approach your graduate application to Georgetown. If you're interested to learn more, I encourage you to reach out to the Georgetown's admissions team or visit their website. They have a wealth of resources available to support you on this journey. As Doug said, 20 minutes of virtual online admissions sessions. You also have this kind of offer. If this is, well, you can find anything on the website, and please feel free to ask. Thank you again for joining us, and wish you all the best in your graduate application process. And everyone have a wonderful evening, and thank you for joining once again.
Thank you, everyone, so much. And thanks, Apurva.
Thank you so much.
Thank you again. Thank you. Okay, great.